Welcome to Art Lounge, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. This is part 12 of Figure Drawing Basics. I will be doing a quick review actually today. Today is Friday, so my goal is to do like a quick review of everything so far every two days with like a brief overview each day of the previous lessons. So let's just do a quick one. This is the page that I like to refer to. The unit of measurement, the head. It's very important. If you're a beginner, even if you're intermediate, I think for me, while I was drawing as well, I was just getting better and better, as I am trying to do now as well. But in the very beginning, I would avoid this. I would just go based off of just outlining rather than trying to three-dimensionally understand a figure, understand how it moves, how other parts of the body are connected to it. It was just more about the outline of whatever the subject was, whatever the object was. I would just outline it. I wouldn't really think of it three-dimensionally. I wouldn't think of it in terms of shapes. I was purely just going off of lines. And while I did get good results, when it came down to working for my imagination, it was a bit of a disaster. Either I would draw exactly what I remember from my outline drawings, but I wouldn't be able to draw things outside of that. I just didn't have the understanding to, let's say, draw a different pose than from the one that I copied and I just memorized. I would struggle with that, and it would be a huge task, or it would be very time consuming because I just didn't know these rules. So the unit of measurement using the head makes it a lot easier. These are dependable guidelines to give you results that make sense, to give you results that portray the figure proportionally and as accurately as possible. So with that said, let's take a look here. We could see, and it's very important to also start with the head, just because as you see here in all these examples, the head fits into all the parts of the body. The leg, the foot, the hand, the arms, pretty much everything. And I'll go through it one by one as a quick review. And it's important to do this whether you remember these lessons or not, just to give yourself just like a mental exercise. This is a warm-up, something to get the cogs moving, in your head, just to refresh your mind and to just stretch a bit mentally as well. Prepare yourself for your next project, whatever it is that you're working on, or just drawing in general. I find it to be a good exercise. So yeah, we got the head here, which is about the same size as the foot, with the toes going a little bit above top of the head. So the foot is just a smidge bigger than the size of the head. The hand is 3/4 the size of the head. So as you can see, it comes up just right about here, not exactly touching the crown of the head. Then we got 2 heads for the width of the torso, 2 heads for the height of the torso. That changes to 3 heads when you include the shoulders and the arms. 3 heads going across, but still 2 heads for the height. And as you can see, right about to where your elbow starts, your elbows are, that's pretty much the length of the arms. It doesn't start from where the neck is, so pay attention to that. It's not exactly 2 heads for the length of the arm, but just know that it cuts off right about where the waist is for the top part of the arm, and then the second half we'll get to. So then we got the leg here, the top part of the leg, 2 heads up to the knee, right about where the pelvic area is. And as you could see, it's slightly angled just so that, it would fit into the pelvic area. This just kind of helps fit everything properly together. So 1 head width for the leg, and notice that it starts out wide at the top and then really narrows down towards the knee. And then from there, it's easy to follow for the second half of the leg, from the knee down to like half of the foot. And that's 2 heads in height. So 1 head across for the width of the top part of the leg, 2 heads for the height. Then for the bottom part, the second half of the leg, it's about 3/4 the width of the head, while still being 2 heads for the height. And over here we got, just grab something thinner to make it easier to point. 2 heads for the top half of the body. From the top of the head to about where the chest is, that's 2 heads. And I highly encourage to measure that out, because sometimes people draw the chest too short. So you could just use your pencil. I still encourage you to get one of these rulers. Where is that guy? Hopefully not on the floor. Where are you? And on the floor he was. So one of these, clear ruler. It's great for being able to see the rest of the body in comparison to what you're doing, especially when you're doing perspectives as well. Very cheap. Came with a bunch of other rulers for $1. I suggest it to everyone. So yeah, you could just use the ruler and you can measure out to make sure. Yep, from the chin down to where the chest is, it's another head. So 2 heads, and then from the chest down to, let's do another area measurement here, to right where the waist is. Now this middle part right here, that's the section where you got like tissue and muscle connecting the top part of the body to the waist, to the hips. Sorry, the waist connects it to the hips. So the waist is really just like muscles and ligaments connecting the two. And that's part of the measurement for the first half. And then from that, from the hip area down to the groin area, that's another head. Now pay attention to this important detail right here. The arm goes way past. Damn, this book does not want to stay open. Okay, that should do it. Yeah, from the for the arm, notice that the hands go way past the groin area. They don't stop at the groin area. They don't line up with the groin area. So the fingers shouldn't be right where the groin area ends. That's a really important detail. You don't want everything else to be proportionate, and then he has like T-Rex arms. It's just not going to look good. It's going to make your drawing look weird. So yeah, that's something to pay attention to. And then for the legs, it's the same idea. That's why they're kind of next to each other, just to demonstrate that you could simplify it to this rule of measurement. Two heads for the top half, 2 heads for the bottom. Now, this is an example of an 8-head body, right? You got 2 and 2, that's 4, 2 and 2, that's 8. But there's also the 7-head figure, and the major difference between the two. Let's quickly get to it. Where is it? least in one of these pages. Where are you? Unless it's even behind all this. No, couldn't have been. Nope. Not here. No, it's here somewhere. Ah, there you go. This is the 7-head figure, and the difference really is the height of the upper part of the leg. So instead of it being this right here, instead of it being 2 heads, it's really 1 head, and then it's still 2 heads for the bottom half. So that's the 7-head figure, and this is the 8-head figure. Then to simplify it even more, you could say the top half of the body is 4 heads, and then 4 heads for the bottom half, right? So just so like when you're reciting and you're trying to remember how many heads are there in a body, you could be like, oh, 4 and 4. 4 at the top, 4 at the bottom. But then once you start drawing, then it starts to, you could break it down and start to remember what parts of the body comprise the top half of the body. So the chest, that's 2 heads. Then from the chest down to the waist, it's 3. Then from the waist down to the groin area, that's 4. There's just these rules to help you remember and make it easier for you to recite it in your head. And this is really what it's for. A lot of this is so that you can create this visual library for yourself to refer to if you're drawing from your imagination. Even when you're drawing from a reference, it sometimes helps to get more control over your own lines. So despite you drawing what you see, you still want to be able to not just refer to the lines of the subject, but also your ability to shape things out on paper. And this simplification makes it easier. So when you are doing a reference and you're drawing, let's say, the arm, you could be like, oh, okay, well, the arm is about half the size of the head. So I want to make sure that my drawing is demonstrating that. And it resembles the reference that way. So you could start with like drawing the cylinder shape as the foundation for it, to give yourself some boundaries so you don't make it too wide, too long, that sort of thing. Building up your visual library. And then the next really important thing that I wanted to go over, and I want to make a habit of going over each time, is this right here. Practicing shading. Simple, easy exercise. This is a stretch before you start drawing. You get better control over the pencil. You get better control over the pressure of the pencil. You're not giving it the death grip. You want to avoid that. That's another mistake. It's a bad habit. It's a very bad habit to not pay attention to. This is something that people tend to do naturally because they want to have more control over their line. So they think if I press and hold it harder, I'll have more control and I'll make better lines with that. And that's just not true. It becomes more difficult going forward because you get frustrated quickly. If you make the wrong line, then it's harder to erase. It becomes ingrained in paper. It's just bad for the process in general. So this exercise helps to develop that. You're not focusing on anything big. You're not creating a big project. This is something that you could just do all over the page and it wouldn't really harm anything. I highly encourage, if you're a beginner, even if you're intermediate or advanced, to get something like this. Very bendable, soft covered sketchbook, good quality paper. I do recommend this brand, Crescent. It's just, I found that the paper quality is great. It's not too coarse and it's not too smooth. Both I find to be very unpleasant to draw on. When you have paper that's smooth, it's kind of like, and you're trying to draw on it, it's kind of like skating on ice. It's just resistant to any marks. So even if you have like a nice pencil, it just doesn't stick well on the paper that's too smooth. It kind of feels like nail on boards for me. It's unpleasant. And then when you have something that's too coarse, that has way too much texture on it, it grinds the paper. It grinds the pencil, rather, not the paper. It grinds the pencil, and your lines are very jaggedy. Like they don't have consistency because the paper is breaking up the line so much. It's just also unpleasant, just like bumpy. It's like driving on a bumpy road in a sense. Yeah, I'm not a fan. I'm not going to say that it's a fact that some people really enjoy it. Some people like the aesthetic of it or the results. Me personally, it's more of like a subjective thing. I don't really enjoy it, but I do recommend trying that out and see how you feel about it. So yeah, get something like that and practice all this in there. If you're on a lunch break, if you're just taking time to just relax or whatnot, you can just pull it out, practice this stuff, and it will really help you in general gain more control over your line variation, more control over your pencil and the way you like it, not pressing too hard. Also, just keeping these principles in mind, not holding it close to the tip, not holding it towards the end of it. It doesn't give you that much range of motion like this, as opposed to this. It's just not comfortable. You don't get to see everything that's on paper because your hand is blocking so much of it, since your fingers are basically almost touching the tip. Whereas with this, you really have greater range of motion with shorter brush strokes or pencil strokes, and you get to see what you're working on. It's out in the open for you. So that's one rule: not keeping it too close to the tip, keeping a distance from the tip. Second rule is sketching lightly. Very important. You want to teach yourself these good habits in the beginning. And then third rule is when you're shading, to keep in mind highlights, midtones, and shadows. So 3 things to keep in mind while you're doing this very simple exercise: keeping it light, staying away from the tip, and keeping these 3 tones in mind while you're doing it. And just practice so that you could start out light and slowly, little by little, add more pressure. This is your pressure sensitivity test. More and more until you get to shadows. And that's just an easy exercise, and try to practice so that the gradation is a lot smoother, from light to midtones to shadows. You don't want to do something like this where light, midtone, and shadows under such a stark difference between each tone. A lot of beginners make this mistake while they're learning these 3 tones, and that's okay. You can always go back to it. You can always try to add more gradations in between to smoothen it out. It's a learning process. Little by little, you'll get better and better. So accept the frustration, accept that things aren't going to be as great as you want them to be immediately. That's just how it works. If you remember back to when you were learning to read, you didn't immediately start reading well, right? Once you recited, let's say, the alphabet once you learned a couple of words, it wasn't like you were able to pick up the heaviest text and get through it and understand everything and get all the words and terms and meanings behind them. It was a gradual process. So accepting that is the same as accepting it for drawing. it's going to take some time, and you just have to stick with it, and you'll be glad you did. You'll really start to enjoy it later. And it carries over to anything else. If you accept the learning process, if you accept that it takes time to get better at things, it won't be as frustrating as you think. You can get past it in a sense a lot easier. So that's one exercise. You could have another one as the basic shape exercise, where you just make a circle and you try to follow a pattern of gradation for it as well. Make sure to have like a curve to it. You want to avoid doing this. I'm going to start out light, right, for the highlights. Then midtones. And then shadows. I'm still curving it. Just naturally want to do it. It still looks okay. You know, it's not as bad, but if you follow the curve, you can see how it's more realistic. It depicts the reality of the object. The reality of the object is that it's round. So when the light hits it, it bevels. It doesn't just go straight from light to dark. Or let me just do another example where I see a lot of students who are starting out as well, and they were making this mistake. Let's do one where it's like really stark difference. So they would say like, okay, highlights, midtones, and shadows. But look how weird that looks. It doesn't look right. Right? It doesn't look like the object is taking much shape. You got the principle down. You got the idea of between the highlights, midtones, and shadows. But it just doesn't sit well with the object itself. And the same mistake people make when it comes to the cylinder shape, when they're trying to practice how to shade the cylinder shape. They'll start out with their midtone, their highlights. Just do it all the way down. Then they would do midtones, and then they would do shadows. And while you got the principle right, it just doesn't make sense on the object in reality. And you could test this out yourself. You know, get yourself a cylinder shape, whether it's like some sort of canned good, and put it up against the lamp. You need a good lamp for drawing in general. You want to have good lighting. So just have that can, hold it up to your lamp, and see how the light forms around it. See where you can detect shadows, for example, to start out dramatically and to make it easier to notice. Where do the shadows lie on it? And just move the object around and see how it bevels around it. How does the light and shadow play with that object? And you'll see that it's not like that at all. It's actually more like this. It resembles this shape more. See how it's from the side? This is where the highlights are. This is midtones, and then the shadows. And then you got reflective light on this end. And reflective light is just this example right here. You got the light source, it bounces off an object and hits back on the object that's in front of it, or wherever else it is. So it's just reflective light coming from other objects that you'll see on objects sometimes. So that's pretty much it, guys. This is the review for the day, talking about some of the important principles. There's a lot more to cover, but I'm going to try to stick to the really crucial ones for now. quick overview of yesterday. We were talking about drawing through instead of drawing just the outside outlining as it is. It said it's construction versus outlining. So this is construction, this is just outlining. It's better to understand the figure three-dimensionally, objects three-dimensionally, because then it allows you to draw them in any position that you like. This is just another example of it, drawing the object three-dimensionally as opposed to just outlining it. Same thing with the body. As well as different body parts you want to avoid, even if you're drawing it three-dimensionally, you want to avoid being extremely simple formed. Remember that it starts to curve in, it starts to taper in towards the end when it comes to any part of the body, really. Even in the torso, you can see it starts out wide and then it tapers down towards the base. Starts out wide for the arms, tapers down towards the base. Forearms, same idea. Top of the leg, bottom of the leg, same idea. Even the neck, except it's in reverse. It's the only object that is in reverse. Actually, no, I take that back. The head. No, actually, the head is the same way as the other one. Starts out wide, tapers off towards the chin. The neck is the only one where it's upside down, where it starts out narrow and widens at the base. And that makes sense because it's holding on so much of the weight. If it tapered down towards the base, then you'd more likely snap your neck into motion. So just to make that easier to remember. Yeah, with that said, let's jump into another session of... Wow, that was 30 minutes. Anyway, yeah, let's just do another session of some of the common mistakes people make whenever they're drawing. So this is going to be an example of the right method. I'm going to divide it in half immediately. Should I just draw the half, the divide right for all of it, the entire body? And I'm using this divide for everything. So if I'm going to draw the neck, I'm going to make sure that the left side is as wide as the right side. So that helps with trying to draw things proportionally. So I'm going to just quickly draw this. Let's do a measurement here. 1, 2. That's about it. And from here to here, about where the waist is, or rather the hip area, where your hips begin. And again, it's the same idea. This divide, this line down the middle, this guideline helps to ensure everything is in proportion. Then we said that the width of the arm is half the head, right? So let's measure at the widest point in the head. Yep, that's about right. Then we said 3 heads going across, including the shoulder. The widest point of the head, that's 1 head, right? Maybe just a little too wide there. So we constructed it based off of this head right here, what we drew in the beginning. Let's just do another. It's relatively about, maybe just slightly wider. Here to here, and from here to here, right? From the chin down to the chest, that's two heads. Then from the chest down to the waist, that's 3. And then from the waist down to the groin, that's 4. Got it. So now, this is a common mistake that people make when they avoid paying attention to how they draw the head. And it's something that I was mentioning in the review. So if you're going to draw the head however you feel like without really perfecting the circle, you know, if you're making it too wide, for example, now this is going to be your unit of measurement, right? So you draw this head, it's really wide. It kind of looks like a guitar pick. You're going to divide it down the middle. Now we said that it's 3 heads. Ooh, even this problem pops up. Space pops up. Okay, let's start a little bit further out. So you draw the head way too wide. Now you have to use right, let's say you do that. See how wide it is at the end? I'm sorry, from side to side it's extremely wide, and then it tapers down to the chin right here. Divide it down the middle. Better yet, let's just keep it within the same height as the first example, just to illustrate even more. So the same size height head, but much wider. It's going to be your unit of measurement, so and what do we say? We said that for the torso, right? For the width of the torso, it's 3 heads including the shoulders. So let's measure this out. it's challenging to even make this mistake. Oh, well, to make it even more simple, let's just say two heads for the width. Two heads for the height, right? From here to here. It's one head. And this is where the waist would be for the second head. So you could tell already how wonky it looks. Draw the arms. And now we're going to connect the hips to the waist, making sure that it's the same size for left and right. And you guys can see that looks so weird. It's a weird body shape. So that's what happens when you draw the head out wrong. Everything else starts to fall apart. All the other parts of the body, because you're gonna stick to the principle of unit. The head is being the unit of measurement. Once you start measuring out the rest of the body using the head, it starts to take on these warped, weird shapes. Everything becomes a lot more broad and just doesn't look right. And then the same mistake happens when it's too narrow. So let's do another one. So since we're using this head measurement, we said it's 3 heads across including the shoulders. So from here to here, and then from here to here, and that's as wide as the entire body is supposed to be, including the shoulder. Then we said from here, from the chin down to the chest, it's 1. Then from the chest down to the waist, it's 3, and then from the waist down to the groin area, that's 4. So 4 heads for the top of the body. About head and a half for the width of the hip area, right? Just refer back. This is why it's so useful to draw it in your sketchbook. In every sketchbook that you're using when you're learning to draw. What do we say here? Head and a half for the hip area. So head and a half for this one. It's about that wide. But as you can see, it's already pretty wonky looking. It's distorted. And then the rest of the facial features are going to look like you're really squeezing them in together to make sure they fit on this narrow face. And that's not good. So you could see, and also, here's another example of when people ignore the size of the head and how that plays into shaping the entire body. So let's say you draw the head and it's kind of weird, right? You don't take the principle of perfecting the circle, being able to draw it well. You don't account for it. You just kind of draw this shape for the head. And like, okay, let's build from there. And you don't take into account that both halves should be proportionate. They should be the same on both sides. So following this principle of using the head as the unit of measurement, you got the height. And now the width. And this is where the mistake really shines. So we set 3 heads for the width of the body, including the shoulders. So one side is about right. And we said half the head as the size for the arm, right? So let's do this side. Right? We're going to measure this half side of the face. And that measures out the size of the upper part of the arm. Head and half for the hips. It's the widest point, right? Head and half measures out to be that. Then the width of the head is the width of the widest point on the upper part of the leg. Just gonna draw the right way for comparison. We can take into account that we draw it according to the shape of the left side that has more of a proportionate measurement. For the sake of comparison, see how bad it looks when you don't consider the shape of the head at the beginning. When you just draw it, however. So as you can see, it looks weird, right? Everything is just warped on the right side because of the head. And then following the principle of the head as the unit of measurement, everything gets distorted. It just doesn't look right. And this is also demonstrating the importance of drawing that line, the guideline down the middle, so that you can compare and see, okay, is it as wide on the right side as it is on the left? No. So something is off. It has to resemble, both sides have to resemble each other. They have to be equal. So as you could see, hold on 1 second, guys. I'll be right back. It's getting pretty hot in the room. Let's turn the AC on. So as you could see how important it is in general to start out properly with the head. You want to make sure that it's the right size on both halves, because it's going to reverberate through the body for the rest of the body, as we saw. Unfortunately, because of the review earlier on, didn't have long enough time to go through the other ones. But I will be back tomorrow, same time, same place, for Drawing Basics, to review other mistakes that people make, common mistakes that people make when they're first starting out to draw, even in intermediate. And this next one is going to be a really important one and something that I see very, very often. So make sure you check out tomorrow, same time, same place, for what that might be. And stay tuned for Drawing Comics, which I will start in 5 minutes. So see you guys then. Welcome to Art Lounge, everyone, to Drawing Comics Part 12. I'll be continuing from where I left off yesterday. And for those of you just tuning in, this is the beautiful work of John Buscema. Amazing artist from Marvel. He's also done plenty of other work. If you guys missed the first episode of Drawing Comics, I highly recommend you check it out to see what I had to say about John Buscema. I had a 5-minute, short flick to talk about his history, talk about his journey to becoming an illustrator, and just showing different work that hasn't even been published either. So it was just a combination of his popular titles, the amazing drawings that he's done, and sketches that have not been published or shown as common. I think there is a book out now with a lot of his sketches there, but some of the drawings I just have never been able to find anywhere else aside from that site. I think the book might have them, so check that out as well. It's on Amazon, I think. John Buscema's sketches. Great work, beautiful work. And this is Conan the Barbarian, the movie special. So it's very similar to the movie as well. And we are going to continue on with this page right here, when Conan got caught trying to infiltrate the cult leader and his meeting, try to spy on what's going on there, and they discovered him. And now he's been captured. And this is where we are now. Just sticking to the principles from the previous stream, I started out with something light, just to set the limits for all that's going on within the panel, to make sure that it fits. All the different parts fit. They're not kind of bleeding out or just shifted way too much. And the best way to do that, one of the best tricks that I've used many a times in drawing, is studying the space relationship between objects. So for example, when I was drawing this knee right here, I was looking at the reference, and I was comparing, well, how far is the knee from the frame, from the panel frame? And that allowed me to draw it exactly in its right placement, so that everything else doesn't have to shift because of it, or there isn't that much of a gap between them, and then compositionally everything gets thrown off. So and that technique helps with many things, not just the example that I gave you. It could be on facial features as well, like simple things like that. Like for instance, studying the distance between the nostril, the top part of the nostril, and the eye. A mistake that so many people make, and it makes the drawing look so weird when people ignore that part of the face. Really study that. If you want to change or really improve, rather, your drawing, pay attention to that detail. It is a game changer. So that technique is great for multiple things. And really it's just another tool in your tool belt to help you accomplish whatever it is that you're set out to do. Just like the head measurement, that being the unit of measurement for the rest of the body, it's just another tool to make sure things come out accurate and the way that you're planning them out to be. I just like to think of it as like you have a tool belt with multiple tools on there, and you just pull them out whenever one doesn't suit the situation. Pull out another, and just varying them in order to get the project done. So just some announcements to make. In the future, I will be changing the hours. Just, as you guys could see, it's sometimes just not enough. Like I was doing the Drawing Basics stream just now, and I do like to include an overview of things that we've learned so far, just to like reiterate and to refresh the mind on very important principles, I think, to keep in mind daily as you're drawing. And that took a good chunk of the stream. It took like half hour to do it, talking about all the different principles and tools, methods, things to keep an eye out for. It took half an hour of the stream, and then when I sat down to draw like new content, the stream was almost over. So that's not really good. And I like to review things like every 2 days, every other day, kind of, to keep the previous lessons or the previous ideas fresh in the mind. And they're just really important, I think, in order to really improve your drawing. And they're things that you have to keep in mind on a daily basis. So just to help you guys there. But it does take up a lot of the time on the stream. So in the future, I'm going to be changing the hours. They're going to be going from 8 o'clock, and it's going to be 2 hours as opposed to just 1 for each stream. So from 8 until 10, it'll be Drawing Basics on Mondays. Then from 8 until 10, it will be Drawing Comics on Tuesdays, 8 until 10. Drawing my projects on Wednesdays, and then on Thursdays it's going to be Coloring Comics from 8 until 10. And 2 hours, it's just not, even 2 hours is not enough. Like, I can easily do 6 to 8. On my own time, yeah, like I could do 6 to 8, even 11 hours for the project that I'm working on. But I don't think you guys want to have 8 hours of that, and an 8-hour stream isn't going to be good for anybody, I think. Sometime in the future, I will be playing around with hours again. Really depends. Depends on the stream itself, how much it's going to pick up. The more it's going to pick up, the more likely hours will change to maybe longer. Oh, this little detail reminded me of last night's stream, the project stream, where I previewed you guys work of Mobius. He's a French artist, and I was just showing some panel work from his comic book and how much little tiny detail really played into creating such an amazing scene. If you guys missed that one, or if you haven't checked it out, I highly encourage you do, just so you could see his work and also just see the issue, the name of the issue, for you guys to search for either on Comixology or other places where you get access to comics. It's just beautiful work. If you're a fan of comics, you absolutely have to own at least one issue of his work. The stories are wonderful as well. Very creative. Extremely creative. Like one of the most creative comics that I've read. And rest assured, guys, I will be doing that plenty of times throughout the stream. I'll be previewing other panels, either from the same issue or a different one or a different comic. I did another one of Eduardo Risso's work. Another favorite artist of mine. Absolutely amazing. So check that out as well. He talked about his techniques and his panel work. This is a little intro to 100 Bullets, the comic book that he worked on. Writer Brian Azzarello. Great story. And obviously art. I'm not sure which stream number it is, but if you guys look at the history of streams, you'll see it. It's also in the description. Row? Do I have to replace the lead? No. Okay, good. Something I really enjoy in old school comics is they did a lot of feathering for shadows. Like instead of just having a solid block for, let's say, a shadow, they'll give it like this texture that I think is so cool. And I really enjoy doing that. And it is a matter of skill. Like I see some people trying to do it, but they're very messy with it. And just doesn't look right. You could kind of tell just from that how much somebody draws or how little they draw or how little they practice. But being very careful with those lines, you know, the feathering lines, can be a world of a difference for the final piece. And that's another great thing to actually practice in this little sketchbook that I was talking about in a previous stream. This one right here. So along with like practicing your gradation and practicing basic shapes, perfecting the circle, perfecting the cylinder shape, you could do feathering where you just like fill up the entire page of just lines next to each other and try to draw them as well as you can. Consistently, with the space between each one being consistent. And just fill up the page as much as possible. looking at this, I'm just trying to remember and compare it to like digital work. When I was trying to do the same thing with digital work, it's so much slower. There's just this disconnect between your hand-eye. You're not looking at your hand while you're drawing, you're looking at the screen. So you don't even see the pencil, and I think that creates a disconnect. I'm sure the software itself creates a disconnect. It kind of like slows down the process. But I think eventually, when you get used to it, you just accept those conditions and then start to work faster based on them. But still, I just really enjoy the traditional process. I like the feeling of how the pencil feels on paper as opposed to digital, where it's like plastic on plastic. Granted, there's some that are really good now that kind of really do resemble the texture of paper, but still, I don't think it's going to be a replacement of any kind. And as I mentioned previously, I like the break from everything digital. So for those of you who are just tuning in and this is your first episode of Drawing Comics, you might ask, why copy this work? And to that, I say multiple reasons. The first one, and it's more of like a personal thing for me, is I find it to be like reading. When you're reading a book, you're in the mind of the writer. You're reading their story. You're reading their way of telling a story. You're reading the characters that they've created for your imagination to manifest, in a sense. To invoke certain emotion using their words. And I find that drawing or copying the comics is similar to that. It's like you are in the mind of the artist. You are creating the characters that they're creating. And because of that, you get into the scene as well. You're creating the lines that they're creating. And when you read, you're also learning, right? You're learning different words. You're learning different ways of telling stories, different sentences and structures and such. It's the same idea with this. You're visually learning. If you are interested in comics, you're visually learning all these different elements that create the scene, that create the characters, perspectives, ways of telling a story through the panels, facial expressions, lines, different lines that you wouldn't have made. But because you're it's like a vicarious experience. You're just living through them in a sense. You're living in this story through them, and you're able to recreate it and learn from it. All these different elements. Now, I wouldn't say this is my work in some ways, and in fact, I would avoid as much as possible to draw just like them. I'm not interested in that personally. I like drawing my own stuff. I like drawing my own characters and styles and such, but this also helps to enrich in that. In a sense, for example, next time you were drawing, you could be like, oh, there was this camera angle, and that was a really fun one. And you could just have that as the base and build from there something new and something different. Alter it. And then soon enough, if you play around with it long enough, it becomes more personalized, as opposed to like drawing it exactly as it is. So I find it to be a learning tool and just a fun experience. And I highly encourage anybody else who's into comics to do the same thing. Pick a comic that you like and practice. Try to draw it from start to finish. And you'll also realize how much work goes into such a comic. So when you're starting your project, you already have some experience. You're not like, whoa, I didn't realize that there's this, that, and the other, and this is how long it takes to actually do this. So it prepares you for so many different things. There's multiple advantages of drawing from comics. For those of you viewers who are thinking about which comic you would like to draw or learn from, post it in chat, share it with everybody else for them to check out the comic book. You guys can engage with each other, talk about what you like about the comic, etc. And just like drawing from all these panels and just seeing how much effort goes into each and every one of them. Just a new level of appreciation for the art form. And how well he would draw. Like, he was pumping out 2 issues per month. But 60 pages a month. Or more. Depending on the issue and depending on the story. Of pencil work. With this level of detail in each panel. Which really goes to show how much he drew. And even his brother, you know, quoting the short film that I made for the first stream of drawing comics. Quoting his brother, he said that he used to eat, sleep, and breathe drawing. Like, he was always drawing. Whenever he was around people, he got bored with things. Or whatever it is that he was doing, he would get bored and just take out a sketchbook and start drawing. Another reason why I highly encourage you guys to get yourself a sketchbook, something small like that. So when you get bored or when you get time, you can also draw and just be in the habit of always drawing. You could do it multiple times throughout the day. It's even better. You want to have like a very intimate relationship with your pencil. Where you get so good at wielding the pencil, it's just, you're pumping out 60 pages a month. And that comes with dedication. So when somebody tells you, oh, it's a talent, it's something that's gifted or whatnot, I suggest you just ignore it completely and just chalk it up as them finding excuses not to try. Because they're either too scared or they were talked out of it from a young age, and rather than pursuing it anyways, they just spread around that terrible notion that only people who are gifted at birth are able to draw this well, and yada yada. It's just nonsense. It's defeatist mentality. Somebody ruined it for them, or they ruined it for themselves by just continuously believing that. It's just a matter of speed. Like, some people are faster at it. Maybe there's like genetic predisposition to it because their parents are really good at it. Or they're just really good at it, whichever. But it doesn't mean that people who don't do it as quickly aren't capable of doing it. In fact, sometimes it works where people who dedicate themselves more than somebody who's very quick at something, whether it's music or anything else, then they just outpace them. You know, not to say that it's a comparison thing, but just this idea that, you know, it's about talent or whatever else, just to argue against it. There's been plenty of instances where people are just able to do great work because they dedicated themselves to it. You know, you don't need to compare yourself to anybody. You just have to be dedicated and challenge yourself. You know, it's one thing to learn from something or someone And it's another to say, oh, I'm gonna do it to like prove myself. Otherwise, it's like you're missing the entire point of what it's all about, which is a process, which is getting into it. You're drawing the comics and you're into the comics. It's not about, I'm gonna finish this comic so that I could show off or whatever else. Like it's not the point. You could kind of see it in their work when it becomes very showy rather than really embracing it. Like from last night's stream showing Mobius's work. I mean, even this, you could just see how much they loved the process of creating comics and all that stuff. It's so evident in their work. And that toxic behavior doesn't belong anywhere, I think. I think it just ruins whatever it is that people are pursuing. Even in culinary art, I think it's the same idea. You don't need to compare yourself or try to beat anybody or any of that stuff. You just have to have passion for food and taste and having that adventurous mind to try different things and challenge yourself, learn from others rather than trying to beat them or whatever else. Like it's just stifles things. In some ways makes your work worse. Not only that, but just spreading toxic environment and behavior. So like multiple negatives to it. And for those of you who haven't heard it from the previous stream, I highly encourage you watch Amadeus. It's a great movie. It's in the 90s. I think it's 1999. I believe it's a movie in 1999. It's about Wolfgang Amadeus, Mozart, and Salieri. And that movie is just a perfect example of somebody who is very passionate about what they're doing, and another one who operates from spite and jealousy and resentment. It's just this movie about how Salieri and Amadeus, they have this relationship. It's like a love-hate relationship, mainly from Salieri. Like he's just so resentful and hateful that this person is just capable of doing things a lot faster and with ease, as opposed to him spending so much time trying to get there that he just completely loses his focus on music and just starts to focus way more on Mozart. And just like he admires him, but at the same time he hates him. This is weird. Well, it's just something that happens when people choose that path. They just become kind of crazy. And rotten. They start to rot within. Which stifles creativity. Which stifles producing interesting work. So yeah, it's a good movie talking about how toxic that mode of behavior is, especially in the creative field. Great acting. Robert Downey Jr. plays Amadeus. Mozart. He's pretty funny there as well. I have to dig into my movie library and find other movies that have the same theme, the same idea. I want to say Prestige, maybe? Maybe? I don't fully remember. And I don't know if it really had a positive message or it was more about just like beating somebody in this competitive mode or whatever. There are other great movies about it. It just stuck with me because overall it was such a good movie. And I watched it, I was like, wow, it's so true. Oh no, I just realized that I totally forgot to stop the stream to divide it. Bummer. No biggie. It's a one-time thing. Maybe I'll figure out other ways of splitting it up in two. So I looked at the time, I was like, an hour and 40 minutes? Really? That can't be right. And then it hit me. I was like, I never stopped the stream. That's why. Truth is, I don't want to stop the stream. I am enjoying this very much. In fact, during that period where, I had to get my computer repaired and all, I realized that I was like, wow, I really do like it. I miss going live. I miss just sitting there and just talking about art and talking about all these different comics, admiring the panel work. It really gives me that time to focus on comics in ways that before I wouldn't. Like if I'm actually, if I'm not streaming and I'm looking at comics, I start to feel guilty because I'm like, I should be sitting and drawing. Like, why am I sitting here looking at it? And this kind of gives me the opportunity to do both. Like to really admire the comics, to talk about them, to look at the work, and at the same time draw. And not feel like I'm wasting time doing something I should be. Or putting in the time that I should be in other areas, like drawing. Just kind of get the best of both worlds there. I'm like freehanding these bricks right now, but there are guidelines. Like, for example, once you draw this one right here, right, that's like the first brick that you draw with perspective, then you can use that as a reference for other ones as well. They have to follow, they have to be parallel to each other. Like this part of the bricks, or this side, can start angling more towards, you know, in this direction. It's not going to look right. But perspective is something that I'm going to jump into later. I still feel like I'm bombarding some of you guys with a lot of this information per stream, but that's the reason why I tend to review more, because I feel like that way, if you miss some things or you didn't pick up some of the things before because it was too much, maybe you'll pick up something new in the review time, and on and on. Maybe you didn't pick up something new in the review, but you'll pick up something new in the next time I do it. And that's really the goal there. I think I'm pretty much done with this panel. The perfectionist side of me is coming out, and I'm just trying to see where are some areas that I overlooked. Making sure angles are right. And comparing it side by side, I could already see that there's some differences there, obviously. But the goal isn't to do it exactly for any other reason than to just improve hand-eye coordination, attention to detail, that sort of thing. That's the only reason why I'm really trying to pursue that level of precision with this work. And with the sad song playing in the background, I will have to cut the stream, everyone. I'm sorry. I will be back tomorrow, I promise. Same time, same place. just get a little bit more of this detail in. If you guys enjoy this content, subscribe. The like button if you're watching it on YouTube. Support the stream. And check out the social media. I will be posting other ways for you guys to connect with each other. That's a little bit more consistent, more personal, and yeah, I'll be making that announcement very soon. Just have to put everything together. Just not enough time in the day. I will be back at 8 p.m. tonight to do the project stream and the coloring comics stream, where I'll be coming back to John Buscema's work. I'm trying to stay within character to the music in the background. But yeah, coloring comics at 9 p.m. and the project stream at 8 p.m. If you guys want to come back for the stream, that's going to be a good time to do it. It's Eastern Standard Time. So, with that said, I'll see you guys then. Thanks for tuning in.